What if I told you that the rise and fall of empires isn't a mystery, but a mathematical equation? That the collapse of Rome, the chaos of revolutionary France, the fall of Ming China, the breakup of the USSR, and even the internal tensions inside the modern United States all follow the same numerical pattern? And what if I told you that a scientist predicted the social instability of the 2020s, a full 10 years before it happened? Peter Turchin is not a historian. He's a mathematician, an ecologist, and a complexity scientist. In the early 2000s, Turchin proposed something truly revolutionary: that history follows measurable, repeating waves driven by cold, hard numerical variables, not kings, not ideologies, not destiny. And at the center of his theory is the engine of collapse: population pressure plus elite overproduction plus fiscal distress. Three numbers that, according to Turchin, can predict when a society will become dangerously unstable. This is the building phase. Think of Rome from 200 BC to 100 AD, or France under the early Capetian kings. You could also look at the early centuries of Ming China or the rapid industrial growth of the United States from 1945 to 1970. In this phase, society is cohesive because the system works for most people. There's a shared sense of progress and opportunity, but then the pressure begins to build. This is the second stage, the stagflation phase, where the society begins to strain. The population starts increasing faster than wages can keep up. Jobs become scarce, housing becomes expensive, and a growing number of common people feel like they're being cheated by the system. At the same time, the elite class multiplies. Suddenly, everyone wants power, but the number of available positions remains limited. The competition inside the elite class explodes. This is where societies grow richer on paper, but also more anxious and divided. The gap between the haves and have-nots widens, political polarization appears, violence slowly rises, and trust in institutions begins to erode. Turchin has a specific name for this crucial factor: elite overproduction. It's when you have too many powerful people all competing for too few elite positions. Think of the late Roman senators jockeying for influence, or the French nobles right before the Revolution in 1789. Think of the late imperial bureaucrats in China, or the USSR officials in the 1970s. And in our modern world, think of the explosion of billionaires, influencers, PhDs, and political aspirants all fighting for a limited slice of power and status. When the elites fight each other, the entire system begins to crack. Then comes the final stage, the disintegrative phase, or collapse. Factions inside the elite turn against each other, sometimes violently. Governments run out of money, so taxes rise, but it's never enough. Trust in the state, in the media, and in each other completely collapses. Violence spikes sharply, and the state begins to lose its monopoly on control. According to Turchin, this isn't about ideology, it's math. When the population-to-wage ratio, the elite saturation level, and the fiscal strain index all cross a certain threshold, collapse becomes probable, measurable, and sometimes seemingly unavoidable. From 100 AD to 250 AD, Rome moved exactly through the mathematical cycle Turchin described. Its collapse wasn't a surprise, it was a countdown. What about France in 1789? We often think of the French Revolution as a battle of ideas, of liberty and equality. But Turchin's model shows the numbers were already there: crippling food inflation, intense crowding and competition among the elites, wage stagnation for the masses, and state bankruptcy. The model predicted it perfectly, 200 years after the fact. The dynasty fell in 1644, right when the key indicators peaked. A massive population surge, combined with fierce elite competition and fiscal exhaustion, created the exact Turchin collapse pattern. Then there's the USSR. By the 1980s, it was suffering from stagnating productivity, intense rivalry between elite factions, and crippling budget pressure from military spending. All three variables had reached collapse levels. The fall of the Soviet Union was mathematically visible before it was politically visible. And this is where the model becomes truly disturbing, because it turns its lens on the present day. The indicators population pressure, elite overproduction, wage stagnation, and spiraling fiscal deficits are all rising exactly as his model predicted they would. According to Turchin's cryodynamics, the US is now firmly in the disintegrative phase of the cycle. So why does collapse become predictable? Turchin argues it's when three specific forces converge at the same time. The first is what he calls popular immiseration, which is essentially overpopulation relative to wages. When you have more and more people competing for the same resources and opportunities, it creates widespread frustration and despair. When the ratio of the population to the median wage passes a certain threshold, instability spikes. Too many political aspirants, too. Many influencers, the elites begin to fight internally for power and status, creating chaos that destabilizes the entire system from the top down. As social conflict rises, governments are forced to spend more and more money on things like the military, welfare programs, policing, and bureaucracy just to keep the peace. Debt grows, deficits widen, and tax revenue can't keep up. The state's ability to solve problems diminishes just as the problems become most severe. When these three numbers converge, collapse becomes mathematically likely. A society rises, strains, then breaks, and from the ashes, a new cycle begins. This brings us to the most important question. Can this cycle be broken? Turchin is clear on this. He says these cycles can be delayed, softened, or redirected, but perhaps never fully avoided. A society can try to reboot itself through smart reforms, like wealth redistribution, reducing elite competition, strengthening social mobility, and restoring institutional trust. But if the underlying numbers, the demographic pressures, the elite rivalries, and the fiscal health remain the same, the mathematical pressure for collapse will continue to build. In the end, Turchin's work offers a chilling perspective. History doesn't just repeat randomly. It rises and it falls like a mathematical heartbeat. Every empire becomes a waveform. Every civilization becomes a cycle. And every collapse, a calculation. Thanks for watching. If you want to explore more stories that reveal the hidden numbers behind our world, make sure to subscribe.